The Odyssey is something that I've loved since probably the second or third grade when I read it, and I was one of those children who was always writing. I was always loved to read big, thick books. And this was one of the biggest, thickest books I could ever see. Little did I know it was like an action adventure kind of thing. I compared it to some people who say, well, what is it like? I think that it's like Lord of the Rings or Star Wars. It's a huge tale that expands a huge amount of time, and it's even in a more exotic place than New Zealand or the Death Star. It takes place in ancient Greece. The really exciting thing about the Odyssey is that there's three layers of universality here. We have the layers of human beings, and this play actually absolutely tells the story of human beings. It's the story of the gods, and it's the story of the other creatures, the monsters, the animals. What I love about Mary Zimmerman's production of the Odyssey, and this is the one that we're basing ours on, is the fact that the actors get to play many different creatures. They get to play animals and monsters and human beings and gods. There are a couple of actors who only get to play one person, like Odysseus only gets to play Odysseus. But it's truly an adventure, and it's an adventure for us as theater people, as designers, as a director, as actors, and I think it's going to be a great adventure for our audience as they follow this astonishing story that's just as interesting now as it was during the 8th century BC. Why? Because it's a quest, an epic quest. There's a guy who has done wrong, and he's paying for it, because the gods make sure that he pays for it. But in the end, there's a resolution that is just rather astonishing, and I won't give away the ending. And another thing that's exciting about the Odyssey is the fact that I really do think it's a show that's right for all ages. My 10-year-old grandson, for example, is currently reading a version of the Odyssey. We got into this when he started reading Percy Jackson, who I was not familiar with, but once I started reading the Percy Jackson series, I realized, well, yes, actually the Greeks told these stories before. But the adventure of Odysseus is not all that dissimilar, right? You have a person who's rather bold and challenging and challenges the world around him, and then he goes on this adventure. But what's fun is the play is not for 10-year-olds, although I think 10-year-olds will really enjoy it. It's for college students who are interested in the adventure themselves. Most of my students right now are majoring in what the heck am I going to do for the rest of my life, and the Odyssey talks about that. One of the leading characters in the show is Telemachus. Telemachus is Odysseus' son. Odysseus' son happens to be 20 years old and 3 or 4 months. The last time he saw his father, he was 3 or 4 years old, and now he doesn't know what to do with himself, except he decides maybe he should go on a quest for his father. So he's questing for his father, the father's questing for his son, the wife, Penelope, is ever faithful, questing for both the son and the father, and all of this comes to a great resolution. So those who are adults and who have been in adult relationships will enjoy this. Now, is Odysseus as pure of heart as Penelope? No, because he has to do certain things to and for certain goddesses. The goddesses all seem to really like Odysseus. This is a true fantasy for all the gentlemen in the audience as well. He just can't go from one island to another without having to deal with people like Calypso and Circe. And as a matter of fact, this play is fascinating because it is narrated by the goddess Athena, who clearly has some kind of crush on Odysseus, and Odysseus owes everything to Athena, and quite literally his life. She saves him on countless occasions because he's made an enemy by a guy by the name of Poseidon. Really can't stand him, and has made it his life's work, and if you're immortal, that's a really long time. So his life's work is to kill Odysseus, and so you have that kind of adventure. Or if you're older, a couple of my favorite characters in this play are the swineherd Eumaeus, or the old maid, and her name is Euryclea. And these are people who have serviced the Odysseus family for decades. And they haven't given up on the fact that maybe Odysseus will come home. And so what do? Well, Eumaeus, the swineherd, helps Telemachus around and makes sure that nobody hurts him. And then we have Euryclea, who constantly is serving Penelope, and and making sure that Penelope is doing all right. At the end of the play, when Odysseus finally gets back to Ithaca, and that's all I'm going to say about that, Eumaeus and Euryclea and Penelope and Telemachus all have these amazing moments where their storylines intersect. And then last but certainly not least, because I'm a grandfather, there's a grandfather in the play as well, Laertes, who has kind of given up hope. And so he's become a gardener, as so many of our Mankato patrons are. And can you imagine working in your garden and the son that you haven't seen for 20 years happens to pop up? It's incredibly adventurous. It's incredibly romantic. It's seemingly sentimental, and it's also a wonderful theatrical event as well. In order to tell a story that goes over 10 years, one of the things we have to do, and this is the genius of Mary Zimmerman, the author and original director, is you have to simplify the story. One of the things that she does, and she did this in an earlier play that we did called Metamorphosis, is she takes these incredibly complex stories and puts them in a way that people can relate to in a couple of hours. And so, for example, our set design is very simple, but it's cleverly simple. It's so clever, we had to bring back one of our wisest and oldest, cleverest people by the name of Tom Bleasy. Tom is a surviving professor emeritus. Many times professors just work and then they leave and they go to places like Arizona. And Tom stayed here in Mankato and works now as a freelancer. But we did Metamorphosis together, and I knew we could do the Odyssey together. And he's devised a simple type of set design, but that is infinitely complex as it moves from one thing to another. Tom also happens to be a professional magician, and one of the things we talked about was how we could work the theater magic of the Odyssey. And rather than doing what we'll call real magic, and real magic, for those of you who don't know, is the kind of magic where you can't figure it out, we wanted to use theatrical magic. So everyone in the audience will be able to figure out what we're doing, but it's so clever that it's fascinating and that it's fun. You're going to see cloth and poles used in many, in 100 different configurations, and that's really amazing. And then another amazing thing is our sound design and our music composition. We've brought back another good friend, Mike Croswell, who's an alum of the music program here at Minnesota State Mankato, but he's also done many shows for us in the theater program. He did Metamorphosis for us. The last show that we did together was called Angels in America. And what Mike does is he does original composition, sound sampling. He does almost a film-like music bed in order to create the environment around. And if you're only having poles and cloth that's hanging on stage, it's really wonderful when you can have music and sound. And there's a lot of different sounds in the show that tell you where you are and even what you're feeling. Because if the actors didn't speak at all, the music would tell you when scary things are about to happen, when romantic things are happening, and when profound things are happening. You put the words of Mary Zimmerman as translated and adapted by Robert Fitzgerald, as translated and adapted from the original Homer, and you have something that's truly a classic, and we can't wait for people to come and see it.